Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
Welcome to Weird Web Radio. I am your host, Lonnie Scott. In this episode, I'm happy to welcome back another guest who's been on before, and I'm sure you'll all recognize his name. It is the one and only Matt Auryn. Matt has been pretty busy promoting his new book coming out soon. At the time of I'm doing this recording anyway, it's not quite available. By the time you listen to this, it very well may be. So go out to Amazon.com or your local bookseller or even Barnes & Nobles and pick up Psychic Witch. It's a fantastic book. I was an early reviewer, and I highly recommend it to anyone out there. It's an excellent addition to you, your tradition, your craft, and even, whatever you're going to do with witchcraft or developing those innate abilities that we all seem to have. From Matt's bio, Matt Auryn is a witch, professional psychic, and occult teacher throughout New England. He's been drawn to the occult and metaphysical since an early age, reading books on witchcraft at 8 years old. He's an initiate of the Black Rose Witchcraft, Cabot Tradition of Witchcraft, and Temple of Witchcraft, and currently a high priest in the Sacred Fires Tradition of Witchcraft. Matt still writes for his blog, For Puck's Sake, on Pathos Pagan. He's a content creator for Modern Witch. He writes a column in Witches and Pagans magazine entitled Extrasensory Witchcraft, and a column in Horns magazine entitled Queer as Folklore. He's been featured in various magazines, radio shows, podcasts, books, anthologies, and other periodicals. Matt was the very first recipient of the Most Supportive Witch Award presented by Witchway magazine for helping others in the witchcraft community and going above and beyond to make other witches feel like they're not alone. If you want to find out more about Matt, you can go back and listen to his previous episode here. You can find him, like I said, on plenty of places all over the internet, and definitely go to his website, mattauryn.com, and check out all the things that Matt is offering. I'm not going to stand between you and getting to know Matt, and more as we take a pretty deep dive into his book, Psychic Witchcraft, and what it really means to be both psychic and a witch. For all those that have yet to join the Weird Web Radio membership, this particular bonus episode is where Matt and I take an extra deep dive into curses. You don't want to miss this one. Go to weirdwebradio.com and click Join the Membership, or patreon.com/weirdwebradio and get started on your membership today. Stay weird out there, my friends. We are recording. Matt Auryn, welcome back to Weird Web Radio. It's great to have you back here, my friend.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be back.
Yeah, and cue Justin Timberlake. We're bringing sexy back, right? So you've been a busy man since the last time I've talked to you. Of course, your blog is always up and running. You continue to do all the great book reviews and causing me to spend money I didn't intend to spend. I'm sure I'm not alone. And promoting other people's work, I always find that a great part of your character, that you go out of your way to promote other people like that. And let me be the first one to thank you for doing it.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I enjoy doing it. I am a geek about occultism, so I genuinely love other people's work. If people are doing great work, I geek out on that as much as the next person.
Yeah, we're a people of the book as much as we are anything, right?
Well, people of the books.
Right. All right. Speaking of books, you have decided to enter the realm of published author yourself. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sure anyone listening to the show has surely seen the marketing and the promotion going on for it by now. You've done an excellent job of keeping it out in the front of people's minds, and I love the marketing material that you come up with, especially gathering quotes and comments from those of us who have gotten a chance to review the book early. I, for one, highly recommend people go out there and pre-order that book, or order it if you're listening to the show after it's come out, because I personally found it to be vital and necessary to the pagan and occult world. But I'm not here to share my opinions. I'm here to get more out of you. Why did this book even need to exist, Matt?
So I feel that this book needed to be written because it's the book that I wish I had growing up. I find that the realm of really focusing on psychic development and the realm of magical development seem to be kind of segregated these days. In my own personal training with the traditions that I've studied under, psychic development is emphasized. Usually it's emphasized for a whole year at the least before you even start touching magic. But a lot of books that I come across, they don't really have any emphasis on psychism. Energy work may be there a little bit, but not so much the perception of that. I was also inspired, not to sound cocky or anything, but I just was really frustrated with the books that I would read on psychic development and the way that they would teach it. And, you know, there's a lot of things about like, you know, how to turn it on, but not really anything about how to turn it off or how to use it safely. So, you know, I felt that there was a huge gap to be filled. So I did it. And through my own personal experience in both psychism and witchcraft, I have found that not only are they complementary to one another, but they enhance one another. They're essentially two sides of one coin.
Okay. And you said something in there when you were talking about the books that were available on the market already, telling people how to turn it on, not necessarily how to turn it off or even use it safely. And I'm going to focus in on that part about using it safely. Okay. What about developing psychic abilities and skills would be dangerous?
So when you're working with psychic ability, you're working with energy, which is why it's two sides of one coin. And a lot of the books that are on the market these days and for quite some time tend to be from more new agey type authors. And when you're working with energy, it's not something that should be taken super lightly. The new age kind of has this perception or this, how would I put it? Okay, so I'm sure you've met those kind of new agey people that are just out of their fucking mind, right? Like they have kind of no sense of reality. They're essentially fried energetically. And fried is a very good word because it's just like someone who's taken too much acid, right? Like in their life, we call them fried. Essentially, they've sort of blown their fuses. And even in the books that do teach kind of basic things like grounding, which is one of the most important things, they don't really go in depth with it. And they don't really emphasize why it's important. So it becomes something that a lot of people kind of overlook, or they're not really understanding what the intent and the will of grounding that energy is. Grounding it's even like I've seen it in books where it's explained incorrectly even. Like it's not so much about just connecting with the earth, because I have that as a totally different exercise, but it's literally like electrical grounding. You know, you need that ground wire to diffuse all that excess energy so that you don't blow your circuits.
Okay. Now, I think probably before we go too much further, there may be people out there who aren't even sure what we're talking about when we say psychic. So when you use the word psychic, what are we discussing? Okay.
So I have a few thoughts on that, obviously. I wrote a book.
I sure hope so.
So psychic ability is usually what people refer to as extrasensory perception, which is perceiving information beyond the normal five senses. So there's this idea of the senses being extended, right? So for example, sight becomes clairvoyance, and that's supposed to be an extension of sight. I actually disagree with the term extrasensory perception. And that's something I kind of talk about in the book a little bit, because I don't believe that they are extra senses. I think that there are primary senses, and I think that our physical senses are the extension of our psychic senses.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, because if you think about it, if you think about our existence as spiritual entities. Being embodied is only a small fraction of that, right? So we're spirits before we're incarnated. We're spirits after we're incarnated. And our psychic senses are the senses that we have as those spiritual beings. And I think that as we incarnate, those are kind of crystallized in a sense when we get a physical body. So I think that the physical senses are an extension of the psychic senses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with all the sense that we're talking about, right?
Yeah. I also differentiate psychic ability and intuition. I see a lot of people kind of interchange those words. In my personal practice and for a lot of witches, we work with the 3 soul models. So I see intuition as being a conversation between the lower self to the middle self. And I see psychic ability as a conversation from the higher self to the middle self. So what I mean by that is intuition is connected to the lower self. The lower self is obviously emotions. It's the physical body. It's our animal self, our animal nature. So intuition is processing information on a level that our conscious mind does not perceive. And all that information is acquired from our environment. So, for example, in certain lines of Victor Anderson fairy tradition, the lower self is called the sticky one because it's constantly absorbing things. So intuition is that kind of animal sense. Sometimes we feel it as emotion. Sometimes we feel it in our physical body, like a gut feeling. But it usually has to do with external influence. Whereas psychic ability is information that has nothing to do with your external environment. This is information that could not be acquired any other way. And this is usually where you start getting like names and dates and that kind of specific information that doesn't rely on any external stimuli.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot going on there to unpack.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. You started out with that answer talking about how psychic abilities are sort of an extension of our physical senses in a way. And you got, so would you say that people might resonate or have stronger abilities towards specific sort of psychic skills versus others?
Absolutely. So I have a full exercise in my book about how to discover which ones are stronger than others. But a very simple technique that anyone can do to figure out how they are predisposed to be stronger, or let me rephrase that. Where people can figure out what their stronger predisposition is psychically, is to just think of a memory. Think of a memory that conjures a really strong emotion, and take a moment to recognize, what are you remembering? Are you remembering a smell? Are you remembering an image? Are you remembering a kinesthetic feeling? We are all wired differently, and this is something that every teacher knows. And I mean, like traditional education teachers, there's visual learners and there's auditory learners and kinesthetic learners. People are just a little bit geared towards one sense more than the other, and that also does apply to psychic ability.
Using psychic skills and psychic senses, you obviously have experiences with these, and you certainly have many of them, assuming you obviously have many of them since you're teaching and writing the book. So in your own life, could you describe an experience where you were using your psychic senses with purpose?
So, okay, for example, I had a man who came to me, I think this was like 2 years ago or something like that, whom his wife, kind of begrudgingly, pushed him into. He wasn't, he was a very skeptical man. And his concern was about work. So I tuned in to his work energy, and just kind of seeing what was going on. And the way that sort of information came to me is I kept seeing a musical conductor, right? So like the guy who, is waving his hands and, leading an orchestra. And I also started seeing a Tesla coil, which was a really weird combination. So psychic ability speaks through archetypes. It speaks through languages. So I try to be very clear about what I'm psychically receiving versus how I'm interpreting it. Because if you're doing the process correctly, the information, the symbols should always be correct. But my personal interpretation from my middle self may be wrong. So I explained what I was receiving. And what it turned out that he does was I don't fully understand the job, but essentially he worked creating superconductors using like electricity or something. I don't know. It see, I don't even fully understand it, which is part of why when you don't understand something, your brain tries to use what it knows. Which is why I always encourage my own students to try to build as big of a lexicon of symbols as they can. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question in a way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, in a way. And, I'm really curious too on, somebody out there listening to this before they get the book, or even after they get the book, they start to experiment and do things. And how does someone, especially in the beginning, discern from their own thoughts or their own desires in a way versus actual psychic phenomena or experiences?
So that's a big part of my book. So a lot of that is where the emphasis on meditation comes in, because meditation isn't just about developing those energetic pathways. I mean, it absolutely is that, but it's also about learning how your own mind thinks, and learning to discern what is you and what is someone else. And a lot of that just takes trial and error. It takes introspection. But in the beginning, it's difficult. And so there has to be a little bit of humility in regards to understanding that something may be your imagination or something may be a psychic hit. Imagination is something that I strongly emphasize in the book, because imagination is where that psychic ability starts speaking to you. I was talking about how, psychic ability works with symbols, and it works with, archetypal language. And that's what occurs when we are daydreaming, when we're imagining. Our brain begins to go into the alpha brainwave state. And that has been linked through various studies to the state of consciousness that psychics and healers and magicians and shamans enter into, somewhere between alpha and theta. But theta is a little bit more trance-ish. So theta, you can't really speak. It's more of like you're falling asleep sort of thing. So I think you would probably be more of an expert on this, but it's kind of more like a hypnotic state. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, I don't use brainwave states necessarily whenever I see hypnosis clients or utilize hypnosis, although it is a fantastic way to help people understand the different experiences they're having as they go into those more trance-like states. The goal being you want to get to a point where you feel kind of like you would comfortable in your car, driving on a country road, no traffic around, perfect, beautiful weather, your favorite song on the radio, you've been on it 100 times, that
right.
kind of chilled, laid back, but you're still focused just enough,
So that sounds like alpha to me. So theta is like that kind of trance state where you can't really speak. You're completely like immersed in the experience. And because of that, the body tends to start shutting down like it would when you're falling asleep. It kind of puts your body into that kind of sleep paralysis mode, so that you don't actually like enact what you're
Yeah.
experiencing and hurt yourself or someone else. It's the body's way of kind of protecting it. So when it comes to psychic ability, there's a stronger emphasis on that kind of alpha state, so that you can still talk, so that you're not completely overruled on it. But getting back to my original thought, when it comes to psychic ability, a lot of it is just, listening to your imagination and not really just dismissing something because you're like, oh, was I just imagining that? Did I just make that up? And that's one of the, with my students and in the book, I put such a strong emphasis on the idea of role playing and just at the very beginning and just, pretending that everything that you receive is accurate and not being concerned if it's really accurate or not. This is why that's one of the very first practices in my book, because people need that permission slip to just do it. And not get hung up on, is this right? Is this wrong? And then as you develop those psychic muscles, like I said, it's just a matter of trial and error and just kind of learning how you think, and understanding when something is most likely a projection or a conjuration of your own mind versus whether it's something that you're receiving from like another unexplainable source.
Yeah, hey, makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to all of you.
I hope so.
Now, in the tarot communities, you often see an argument pop up, and it can get pretty heated over whether or not tarot readers are also psychic. And the argument is usually about whether or not psychic is a term that you would even want to be recognized by, less so than recognizing the skills that are at hand. Why is it that psychic, you think, has this stigma around it in some circles?
So I think there's probably a few answers to that. So I think one is a sanitization, trying to remove it from, fraudulent scam artists. But we tend to see that a little bit more in palmistry. For some reason, palmistry has the biggest amount of cases of that than tarot. And then also, I think it could also come from an area of insecurity. I mean, where it's sort of using the tool as a crutch. So it, in a way of like not taking personal responsibility for what you're telling the client or what you're receiving. It may also be that someone is completely, how would I put it? Like left brain systematically approaching the tarot, which I think is not going to give you a completely accurate reading because it is divination. It does involve that spiritual aspect to it, just in the name of divination. I mean, in my readings, there is a very strong psychic component to it. A lot of times, there's information that the cards aren't really saying that you receive that is accurate. I can give an example if you'd like.
I love examples. They're my favorite.
Okay. So I think every October I read at Laurie Cabot shop in Salem, and it's like all month long. It's like 400 readings, and I had a client. You get lots of people, like people of various belief levels and various, issues. But I had this woman come in and she was concerned about her son. And I normally don't read for other people that are not present in the room if they're adults. But she seemed really worried. So I checked in with my spirits and they were like, just do it, break your own rule, just do it. So I was doing the reading and, the cards brought up, signs of addiction, various things like the Eight of Swords and the Devil card and things of that nature. But So I'm going over this. I'm like, I'm seeing that there may be an issue with like addiction or indulgence. And she's like, yes, yes, yes. And I'm staring at the cards. And as I'm staring at the cards, all of the sword cards, and there were a lot, started turning into needles. And I started feeling really weak. And I don't know what you call it, the other side of your elbow started to ache. And so trying to be clear about what I receive versus how I interpret it, I'm like, this is what I'm receiving. And I feel like it may be heroin. And she's like, no, there's no way. He hates needles. He's so afraid of needles. Like, he would never do heroin. And I'm like, okay, well, I've been doing this long enough that even if it's wrong, I want you to just hold it, put it in your pocket, and maybe it'll make sense later. Maybe it's a symbol. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. So I didn't hear anything until the next year. The next year, I'm in the middle of October again doing my readings. And she sat down in front of me, and I didn't recognize her just because there's so many people that I read. And she reminded me of the reading, and she said that she went home that night and because he lives with her, and went through his drawers and found heroin needles and heroin. And she was able to put him in rehab, and he was able to get his shit together. But that's an example of how psychic ability can be put into the tarot, or a psychic aspect of the tarot that the tarot is not necessarily saying. I see the tarot as sort of laying like the big picture. And I see psychic ability as really like honing in on the fine points. Sometimes during a reading too, I will just get complete information that has nothing to do with the reading, or it has to do with the cards. Sometimes mediumship comes through as well. And I found that they usually tend to go hand in hand. If I'm doing a reading for someone, I tend to find that any of the spirits that come through have something to do with the reading. So either this person has life experience in this, or this person went through those struggles or had that quality. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but
that's okay.
But I have found a weird correlation with that, with who appears to me during a reading for a client in regards to the mediumship type aspect.
That was a fantastic answer, my friend.
I'm sorry, it's so long-winded.
That's what I like the best. And I know listeners do too. The more we get to know you and the insight and your actual experiences, I think the more people connect and really want to know more about you and get a hold of everything that you provide. So I'm looking through your book, and right away you start with a chapter title that says Psychic and Magical Power is Our Birthright.
Yes.
Explain yourself, sir.
Well, as I was kind of touching on earlier, I believe that the psychic senses are the senses that we have as spirits. I think that they are natural abilities. I also believe that magic is completely natural. It may not be fully understood by some of our models of measurement, such as science and such. But I do believe that everyone has the ability to wield magic. I believe that everyone has psychic ability. It's just a matter of whether you want to put in the elbow grease to develop that and make something of it.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that narrative still exists in some places, that somehow if you're not born a certain, I don't know, to certain traditions or families even, that you're not supposed to be wielding magic or witchcraft.
Well, and that's so ridiculous because, if you trace it, if you were to do the whole bloodline thing, which I don't like because that gets into like weird eugenics stuff.
Right.
But like if you were to, I mean, all of our ancestors were pagan or magical or shamanic. Like it's like we all have it. Like the world used to not be Christian. The world used to not be monotheistic. The world used to be very magical, very, I hate using the word shamanic, but like, far back enough, it's shamanic. Like,
go ahead.
Our ancestors weren't in caves, cave painting crucifixes.
How do you know? No, I'm just kidding. Were you there? No.
Well, that kind of goes along the lines of, the devil planting dinosaur bones to trick us.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
I know, because I'm psychic.
Yeah. Yeah. And anyone listening, if you haven't had the genuine experience of a true believer standing in front of you face to face telling you that the devil put the dinosaur bones here to trick us, you're missing out. You live a sheltered life. All right, let's see here. You also talk about reality being energy. Mm-hmm. What do you mean when you say reality is energy? I think energy is one of those words that we throw around in paganism and witchcraft and the occult without necessarily explaining ourselves very well.
Totally. I mean, everything is energy. I mean, just like looking at it in a scientific manner, what is matter? Matter is just energy vibrating at different rates. But that ties into like my woo beliefs too, as the idea of animism and the idea that everything fundamentally is created from 4 different energies, which we call the elements, and that those 4 energies are derived from source, or spirit, or quintessence, or whatever you would like to call it. And that doesn't really contradict science either. When you think of things such as the Big Bang, everything right. coming from nothing. So energy is a weird word because it can be used in various ways, just like you were saying. It can be referring to subtle energy, which is kind of more the energy we work with as witches and psychics. Or it can just be energy that we're constantly interacting with, like radio waves and microwaves. And yeah, does that answer the question?
Radio waves, microwaves, pageant waves.
Right.
Yeah. Whatever wave you're into, right? No, I get it, and it's almost unfair to ask a question like that unprepared.
No, it's totally fine.
Yeah, but it's one of those that I do like to get into sometimes because we always say energy. They're like, reality's energy. Well, what kind of energy? And I have one friend who's a physicist who would beat us both over the head with textbooks,
right?
For using the word so lazily,
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes into the more quantum physics, kind of veering into pseudoscience.
Yeah, we took a sharp left turn. No,
right.
That's okay.
But I mean, we do know from physics that like everything is made of atoms, right? And those atoms are made of particles that are made of particles that are just essentially, you go down far enough and it's just kind of mysterious movement that is occurring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are great, big, expensive things in the world trying to figure out even smaller bits of the universe. So
right.
The answers are not all in, folks. Just keep doing your thing. If it works, carry on.
Yeah, I am not a scientist. So.
Yeah. So in your chapter 8, The Higher Self and True Will,
okay,
you have a section that I think is going to get a little more attention thanks to the show Hellier. And the title of that section is Synchronicity.
Oh, yes.
Why is synchronicity an important part of your book?
Well, because I am a huge fan of Carl Jung, who coined the term. And Carl Jung's work was very pioneering for a lot of things that we take for granted in occultism and spirituality and things of that nature. But his idea of synchronicity was synchronicity is two randomly seeming events that are connected through meaning. So when we go back to the idea of the universe speaks in symbols, Carl Jung discusses in one of his like bajillion books, I don't remember which, it's probably one named Synchronicity. But he discusses how he realized that the collective unconscious, that's the word that he uses for the sort of greater mystery that we're all plugged into, communicates to us through synchronicity, through things that would seem completely random or coincidental or chance, but that do hold significance and meaning through connection, through, as occultists, we could say correspondence. So synchronicity is one of the ways that you sort of learn. So this goes into my idea that, a little bit more of my mysticism side, which is that reality is a dream as well. And one of the ways to understand the self and psychic information and our what the universe, for lack of a better word, is trying to convey to us is through observing our dreams and analyzing our dreams and finding the meaning in that. And that would apply in waking life as well.
Okay. Could you share like a time when synchronicities really had this profound effect on you, where you noticed maybe one or two or even a series of synchronicities that revealed something to you that really mattered?
Yeah. So I'll use the one that I give in the book. So this was when I was living in California, and I would help my dad out with his job. He owns a plumbing company in California. And the night before, I had a really profound experience with this spirit, with my spirit familiar, who often takes the form of an owl, which I think we may have talked about on your last show I was on.
I think we did. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next day, despite it being this amazing, like out of body experience and like just totally surreal, just like any sort of experience that we have that defies what we are told should be real, it starts becoming less real and less real in our heads as time goes on, just sort of like it was a dream. So, I woke up being like, wow, did that really happen? Or, was this just something that, I dreamt about? And so I went to go help my dad. I was going to work with him for the day. And every house we went to, we must have went to like 20 houses, right? There was an owl at the door, not like a animal owl, but like some sort of like either an owl doormat, an owl wind chime, an owl statue, every single freaking house. So I'm like, wow, that's really fucking weird, right? So I go back home to my apartment, and on the door is an ad hanging from my doorknob for some company. I don't remember what it was, and their logo was a fucking owl. so it was just sort of a way that I say the universe to try to keep it vague, but it's a way that this spirit was showing me that, yes, this was a real experience by using everyday symbols that would have seemed random if it did not hold such strong meaning and significance.
I like that you point that out too, that, you said you're keeping it kind of vague, but I think there's something here we can dig into a little bit, because, as an example, like crows and ravens are a really important part of my spiritual work and the things that I do. Mm-hmm. And when I walk outside my door, there's always a 60% chance that I'll hear that very beloved to me sound of them cawing. that doesn't necessarily mean it's a special message for me, but a lot of people might think it was. So, for the people out there who might doubt themselves or get confused on that front, how do you tell when it's something that might be more of a message than just a random act in the world?
Well, I think that's something that's really hard to discern in general. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very big on journaling and record keeping, to just kind of record it, whether you're sure that it's a sign or an omen or not. I mean, for me, with crows, like I go even a step further, where I'm divining with it, with like augury. So like, what direction did they come in? Where are they facing? How many are there? Because I do think that everything holds meaning, whether it's a direct message that is so strong that it's an omen, or whether it's something that has a significance that we don't understand. But this also goes back to my idea of dreams. So I don't believe that there is such a thing as dreams that don't have meaning. Sure,
all dreams have meaning.
All dreams have meaning. So even
if
yeah. So for example, some people will be like, "Oh, I had this weird dream," but it's because I watched this show and I had this conversation. And it's like, yes, well, that's true, but like, what is your subconscious trying to tell you? That doesn't mean that it's some grand mystical message. But dreams are the way that we process information and we process reality. So every dream holds significance and some sort of insight, either through what we're going through or what may happen. And honestly, just like I'm saying with meditation, with observation, through record keeping, that's the way you kind of discern it.
Okay. You heard it here, folks. Weird Web Radio exclusive. All dreams have meaning.
No, I really do believe that, because like I was saying, like the mind uses the symbols that we know. So if we have symbols fresh in our head, yes, it is sort of like processing information, but it's not random. It still has significance. It's still giving you insight about yourself and what you're going through, even if it's just insight into an anxiety or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I tend to agree with you there. It doesn't mean if you have a dream where you're in a fight with a robot toaster, maybe you have issues about AI or something, right? So you've unleashed Psychic Witch into the world. Now, almost. It's not quite out and in people's hands yet. But like I said, it is available for pre-order. And if you're listening to this later, please go out and grab it as soon as you can. What is it that you're hoping to achieve ultimately with this book?
So my intent from the very beginning of even writing it is just that I hope that it helps people. I hope that, because there's tons of benefits to psychic ability. There's tons of benefits to magic, as we know. And I think that these are tools that can really enhance an individual's life. And, there is a really strong healing component to my book as well, which I think gets overlooked a lot by people who like review it or blurb it or whatever, because there is a lot of that inner work that is occurring that can't be avoided with any sort of meditation.
No, that's fair. And I agree. I think that's an important part of what you've done is getting into how people can, heal and do a lot of that inner work. It's something that shouldn't be neglected. And I think that leads into my next question too. People who are going to start working on psychic witchcraft, the form of which you presented to the world, what do you think could end up being some of their biggest mistakes or potential pitfalls?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so I mean, I think I think discipline is a big thing, and it's something that I really try to emphasize in the book, that these things aren't easy, and not to get discouraged by it, and to really just kind of take your time going through the exercises and making sure that you've built a strong foundation. For meditation, for example, a lot of people get discouraged, or I'm sure you've met a ton of people that are like, oh, I can't meditate, I can't clear my mind,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of a fundamental misunderstanding of meditation. Recognizing that your thoughts are wandering is the meditation process. If we liken it to lifting weights, the mind wandering is that weight that we're lifting. Every time you recognize that your mind has wandered, you bring it back. And that's sort of like that resistance of like lifting a weight that makes your focus stronger. So I think the biggest pitfall would be thinking that it's something that doesn't take work, that doesn't take development, or giving up because it seems like you're not getting instant results right away. I believe that, witchcraft is a practice, and I believe that the word practice holds significance. It's something that we keep practicing because we're trying to get better at it.
Yeah, I like that. Witchcraft is a practice. Yeah, so keyword being practice. Good advice there. I think at this point, I just want to get into a question. No, that's not how I want to word this.
Okay.
I think at this point, we've done a good job of previewing your book. And I hope it's generated a lot of interest in anybody listening who hasn't already ordered the book. Like I've said more than once, but in advertising, what you tell people 3 times suddenly becomes true. Go buy this book as soon as you possibly can. There's a question I've been liking to ask guests in the last season and a half or so that I've added to the show just to get to know the areas where people live and what they're into. So any place that you've lived, whether currently or previously, there's always local lore and legends that would certainly appeal to those of us who are in paganism and the occult, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your favorite local stories or landmarks that you really resonated with?
I don't know about resonated with. So right now I'm in New England, and I, being a psychic, I can see spirits, and I can perceive spirits, and I can perceive their interactions. And there are these little, not to sound all hellier again, but there are these little spirits that are kind of goblinish, right? And
Okay.
One of the things that I thought was interesting was that they seemed to be very, how would I put it? Like they were weaponized in a way. That's the best I can explain it. And it reminded me of like darts or a bow and arrow or something like that. And it's interesting because here, at least in my part of Massachusetts, we have the puckwedgies. And that's...
What's a puckwedgie?
So,
it sounds like a terrible thing you do to someone in a gym locker room.
So a puckwedgie is a spirit, obviously, that the local Native Americans have lore about and legends. And they're essentially these little goblin folk with bows and arrows that shoot people and steal people, and very fayish. So I think that's interesting. When I was younger, and I lived in Northern California, this is getting into real woo here. I lived on Mount Lassen, which is like right by Mount Shasta. And I would continuously have dreams about what I didn't know was at the time, but now, like, looking back, is totally like a Bigfoot. You know, I used to have dreams about these like hairy Sasquatch like creatures, constantly, like, and the dreams were not super dreamish, so it would just be them like entering the yard, or just walking past the fence. It's nothing that I perceived awake during psychic means, but it's interesting because that kind of Northern California moving into Canada, you start getting that Bigfoot lore and those Bigfoot sightings and stuff of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Do you think Bigfoot's a spirit or a physical creature? Everyone really wants to know.
I'm not sure. I can't. I would be full of shit if I had any belief one way or the other, because I don't know. I think there's a lot of possibilities. It could be an ancestral ghost of like Neolithic man. It could be a nature spirit. One of the things that I think is really interesting is the idea of, well, I'm sure many people would argue with it. It's something that seems to be kind of worldwide. I mean, there's different variations of it. And even if we look at just like Europe and Arthurian legend and stuff, like we have the Woodwoses, which essentially, like, I mean, they sound and look like Sasquatches. So I don't know. I would have to meet one in person to give you a better answer. And if I do, right, I'll be sure to ask.
Please do.
I'll try to line up an interview for you too.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be awesome.
Get them on your show.
I'll be the first one to interview a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. All right. So, if people listen to the show, my listeners are predominantly witchcraft and pagan occult, leaning folks. Mm-hmm. And we want to head up into the New England area, something that would appeal to the way, our kind of thinking. What is it that you think we should go see first?
I mean, the most obvious would probably be America's Stonehenge, which is sort of a mystery. And I'm not super informed on that. I think other people have had experiences there. I haven't really. I don't know. I'm in a weird place because the land here is very different for me, being pretty much someone who's grown up in California almost my whole life. So my connection with the land tends to be just kind of right where I live and not so much venturing out like I would in California. So
that's fair. No, that's fair.
I mean, Salem's fun if you're a tourist.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to turn you into the New England tourist agent.
Yeah.
So I think we've come to a good point where we could wrap up the regular part of the show. If there's anything that you wanted to talk about or say that I didn't cover, now would be a good time to include it.
Sure. So one of the big things that my book covers that I don't think we really touched on is going back to the idea of how psychic ability enhances magic. So just, a quick pitch about one of the hearts of the book is this idea that, so if magic is the manipulation of energy, energy is best manipulated if you can perceive it. Because I know many witches who do magic, but they're not sure if it worked. They're not sure when they cast a circle if they've really cast it or if they're just kind of going through the motions. They're not sure if something's really fully charged. So really learning to develop those psychic abilities really benefits your magic in just understanding if you've done it correctly. It can also be reverse engineered, which I talk about in my book, where you sort of add that extra psychism and that extra sensory projection upon your magic that enhances it like crazy. But yeah, I mean, like, so for example, I can usually tell if a circle has been cast properly, because over the last couple of years with my psychic development, one of the things that I've noticed occurs when a circle is cast, I start hearing a ringing sound in my ears, similar but not quite like tinnitus, and it goes away as soon as the circle is released. So it's just sort of those, you know, being able to actually perceive what you're working with is going to enhance your magic and your practice immensely. At least it has for me.
I think that's a good point, because if you're standing at your altar or you're outdoors or anywhere, and let's say you've cast your circle and you've called a spirit to work with, how would you know that they were actually there? I think sometimes people just assume that it's worked and move ahead, or they're so full of doubt they're not sure what to do next. But I think you're right. Developing those psychic abilities would enhance the effect of actually knowing what it is that you're doing step by step.
Right. And that doesn't mean that magic can't work because you can't perceive it. One of the things I reference is a concept by Ivo Dominguez Jr., who's absolutely brilliant. In his book, The Key of Perceptions, he talks about noirs as the opposite of clairs. So noir being the French word for dark. So people can manipulate energy and not be aware of it. But I mean, like, if you don't have to, why would you be doing something with a blindfold on?
Well, Matt, where can people find you in the book?
Oh my God, you can find me everywhere online. I have made myself available. So, you know, I am on
an open relationship with social media, folks.
I do. I'm on pretty much every social media. I'm Googleable. My book is on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, it's Llewellyn, so the distribution is pretty good. If your local bookstore or occult shop doesn't have it, you can always request that they order it, because pretty much all of them have a Llewellyn account and catalog. But yeah, I'm easy. I'm easy to stock.
Yeah, that is true. And you do a very good job of making sure people can find you.
Yes, I do.
Well, thank you again for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me back on.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun. Now, folks, you know the drill. We're going to go into the bonus audio section for Patreon members. This time is going to be a little bit different. Since Matt's already been on the show, we've decided to take a specific purpose to this extended interview where we're going to be talking about curses. The good shit, right? So if you want to be a part of that, you're going to have to go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership to see you on the other side of that conversation. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends. All right, Matt, we're in the bonus audio portion. Now, I know I've asked you this question before, and I'm just curious if you'll still answer it the same. Standard first question: what famous person's resting place do you want to visit? Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions and magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.